Um, he took material from free association. Free association is where you kind of just start talking about anything or writing about anything, and it's kind of whatever comes to mind. It's anything that pops up in your head at the moment, like bubble gum, or raspberry donuts, or Kentucky, or skydiving. Right now, I'm just saying random things, but that's what the free association concept means, and you know, he would kind of use these exercises, if you will, to kind of explore maybe what's going on in someone's mind. I don't know what that just said about my mind, but these are the kind of techniques that he would use. I'm going to skip over some other things, but I want to talk about, just going back to the unconscious, he refers to it as an iceberg, and that the consciousness, what goes on and what's observable in our behavior, is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you can imagine an iceberg, I can see myself, by the way, at the very tip of the iceberg, where the waterline is the things that we see. People do and act and how they behave and what they say. But all beneath the water, there's this giant ice mass. And these are all the things that are really going on in the mind. And these are where kind of decisions are taking place, and this is where some of our anxiety comes from. So we're trying to explore these underwater icebergs, if you will. He said consciousness is only a thin slice of the whole mind. He also said unconsciousness is where memories are stored, and also a place where we put our repressions, things that we're not really comfortable in dealing with, things that make us upset. Let's say the death of a parent, or something quite traumatic in one's life. Oftentimes we push it back and we hide it and we don't go there. That's where they kind of lie. They lie underwater in these icebergs, and they only kind of squeak out subtly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, because we're deterministic, Freud thought that the needs and our motivations in life were outside of our conscious control. He did not think, okay, we make a decision about what we need and what we want, and then we go after it. He said, no, we're driven by this underground iceberg, and we are kind of subject to it, and we're just kind of flowing with it. So hopefully, our aim is to make the unconscious conscious. We're trying to bring to light what's underwater in this iceberg. We're trying to explore the labyrinths of our mind that we do not fully understand yet. You know, and through the concepts of going back in time and looking at our childhood, looking at our dreams, looking at free association, looking at some of these things, we'll have a better understanding of ourselves, and we'll be able to understand a little bit better about why we do the things that we do. He said that within our unconsciousness, this is where the root of all of our disorders is. This is where our stress comes from. This is where our attention deficit comes from. This is where our fears and our anxiety and any sort of issues that we may have come from our unconsciousness. Again, people will come to argue this later on in time, but these were his original ideas. I thought this was pretty interesting because he was the first person to really bring this up, that that clients tend to cling to old patterns, that they really find a way to live and they go about it. It may not be the most healthy way to live, but they go about it. So let's say you have this deep-seated issue with spiders, and you've come to live with avoiding spiders. Maybe not the best way to live, because there's going to be spiders in your home. You know, they're around. You know, maybe there's another way to live. Maybe there's a healthier way to live than just walking around spiders, or getting your husband or your wife to squash the spider for you. People have become comfortable with adapting to some of their unconscious problems or anxieties. So unconsciously we go about living our lives in accordance to a pattern that may not always be healthy. We kind of want to try to highlight that and possibly find ways to change that pattern, to break out of that pattern that could maybe give us a better life. When we talk about anxiety, oftentimes anxiety can be good. It can be a motivator. It can warn you of danger. But at times it can punish you. It can become neurotic. And it really could cause you to, physically, anxiety has its effects on you. It increases your heart rate, your blood pressure, causes internal damage. And let's be honest, it's not really fun to be anxious all the time. So in some senses, anxiety can harm you. So one of the things that we're trying to do with psychoanalysis, we're trying to alleviate some of that anxiety. And again, the way that he says to alleviate it is to understand the causes of it, the roots of our anxiety, and then hopefully with a better understanding, we'll be able to kind of release whatever kind of negative energy this is, whatever, and we'll be able to move on with our life. And when the ego, remember that between the id and the superego, when the ego cannot balance or cannot control our anxiety, that's when we go to ego defensive mechanisms, things to protect our ego, ways to help us cope with the anxiety, ways to help us deal with some of these overwhelming emotions. I'm just going to rattle off some of them. You've probably heard of them before. Repression, denial, reaction formation, projection, displacement, rationalization, sublimation, regression, introjection, identification, and compensation. All of these things are in your text, so I don't want to go over them and break them down individually. But basically what they do is they're ways for us to avoid reality, or avoid thinking about reality, avoid putting ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. So just for an example, if I have some sort of issue with maybe my childhood, let's say I was abused, I may repress it so much that I don't even bring it up. I won't even let myself go there. Or I'll deny it. I'll say, no, that never happened. I'll just kind of simply just say no, without being abreast to reality. And these are the kind of things that keep us stuck in these patterns. Yes, they might be comfortable temporarily, but they don't help us in the long term, because we're just going to keep on following in these patterns, and without actually going deep, we'll never fully be able to break out of it.